There we go. Welcome so much to TAP Therapeutic Astrology Podcast. Welcome to Tap In with us and welcome back to you, Corey Keys.
It's good to be back, Mannah.
We're here to talk about the next part or the second part of your book, Languishing. So I do recommend that people go to the first part of our conversation and then dive in this one with us. So
Yeah.
you say that when we are flourishing, which is kind of the opposite of languishing, right?
It is.
Then
Yes.
it's like bad things are not sticking around. They can't get into us and they can't stick around. I like that.
Yeah. As I was looking at the research, that was the best way I could express it, Mannah. And I want to be clear with your listeners. It's not that people who are flourishing do not do bad things and do not experience negative and bad things. They do, and there's some studies we could talk about in that regard. One is a remarkable study that showed that people who are flourishing are far more likely and predisposed to apologize than people who are languishing. Now, the fact that they're more predisposed to apologize suggests to me that it's not that they don't do wrong to others. It may not be intentional. Maybe sometimes it is intentional. Who knows? But the fact that they own up, right? We have the expression here in the United States, you own your wrongdoing. You take responsibility for it. And then you redeem yourself in the eye of the person you've harmed by saying, I'm very sorry for hurting you. I recognize that I've hurt you. And a really good apology is about saying that either literally or implicitly to the person that I will learn from this. I promise, you can trust me that I am going to try very hard not to do that to you again. So that's just one study. And then there's multiple studies showing that people who are flourishing do experience almost the same amount of stress in a typical week. Right? There was this study that followed people for 3 weeks, for 21 days straight. Every day they interviewed people and asked them about their sources of stress that day. And then in the interview, they measured their negative mood, how angry, resentful, fearful, anxious, sad, and depressed they felt that day. Now, the more sources of stress you experienced in the day, the more negative mood you experienced. But that was far less true of people who are flourishing and much more true of people who are languishing. So if you're languishing, you experience the same amount of stress as somebody who's flourishing.
Okay.
The flourishing person is not going to let that stress result in as much negative mood as somebody who is languishing. That's the point I'm trying to make. It gets inside, but it doesn't create like a thunderstorm or a tornado. It's there, but I almost get the sense that people who are flourishing are very aware of it and they manage it.
Yeah. So it's really about how we relate to it. And as you say, it doesn't stick around.
Yeah, it doesn't stick around, and I'd like to believe, and I'd like to see people who study this in the future, are people who are flourishing much more likely to learn from their negative experiences than languishing. And that the reason you get stuck in a cycle of languishing is that when bad things happen, they really set up and set off a lot of negative mood. And when negative mood is so intense and so strong, it's very hard to sit with it in a way that allows you to think about it in a way that you come away wiser for your negative experiences.
I instinctively know what you're talking about,
Mm.
as I definitely have been like that, where something happens and it's just a confirmation of, the shit that I take myself to be. It's just a confirmation. that I should never have done all of that. And that's one path to take. And then there's the other one saying, I'm new every day, every moment, actually. And like you say, it's an opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about the path to happiness.
Yeah.
That you talk about two distinct paths. TH is difficult. The path to focus on. So, what is the internal path?
Well, the internal path is when you go inside of yourself. We call it introspect, right? The ability to introspect and to engage in what cognitive psychologists call reflexive thinking, to take yourself as the object of your own thought and to go inside and to think about areas of where you are vulnerable or weak, or where you have what we might call character deficiencies, right? So traits or qualities that are negative, that don't serve you or others very well. When that happens, we can spend a lot of time blaming others for our own deficiencies and externalizing it. But the real work to flourishing is to have to address our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities, our character deficiencies, and to work on becoming a better human being for other people. The internal path is going inside and taking spiritual, religious, or other therapeutic steps to work on yourself, to accept the fact that you are doing things in a way that's not very conducive to living well, which is a big step. Again, it's taking responsibility for what you can change, which is you. And I think that path is not privileged very much, in the sense that when people engage in spiritual activities, I don't think they always engage in those activities to go inside and address the need to become a better human being. They engage in them for reasons that are very superficial sometimes. Like, people meditate not because the way Buddhists talk about it, becoming a better human being. They meditate so that they can deal with stress better. I think these spiritual internal paths were designed for us to take a journey to becoming a better human being, a good person. And that's very different from the external path. I'll just contrast that, Mannah, and then I'll stop. The internal path is about becoming a better person for the world. The external path is becoming a better person than other people at something. We do a lot of work in the modern world through the external path, through education and competition and work and privilege and esteem and hierarchies. We don't do a lot of work on the internal path unless we break down and we take therapy very seriously.
That is really good. That is really good. Yeah. So we do it to the external path. It's not so nice to look at, right? You want to be better than other people.
Yeah. Yeah, and you gain your happiness and your well-being at moving up in terms of the hierarchy and social comparisons and doing better than other people. And that's a limited activity. It's self-limiting because there's only so far you will go on that path. And then you will find other people who will always do better than you.
Yeah.
And then what are you going to do with it? And then some people achieve the pinnacle. Sometimes they have more wealth than they need, more privilege and power than they need. So what do they do with it? They begin to waste it and use it in really undesirable ways that's counterproductive to others' well-being and their own. So it's a very self-limiting path. The internal path, I cannot find any self-limiting. It's an endless process. You will never reach the summit. His Holiness the Dalai Lama admits this every day. I am nowhere close to being the best person I can be for the world. He will never summit that mountain. And that's the beauty of the internal path.
Yeah, that resonates a lot. And it's like a blockage for spiritual arrogance, right? You can't master this. Now I'm completely fulfilled.
No, when you think you've found the way to be the best version of yourself, I suspect you are preparing yourself for a problem in your life because it's never done.
You do talk about illusory superiority.
Yeah, I didn't use that word. I forgot about, you reminded me of that in your question, but you're right. I think people, I refer to this in one of the chapters on the vitamins about growth and learning, because there is this desire that's very prominently studied in social psychology around the world, which shows that people in almost any culture have this desire to see themselves in a very positive light. And I have to say, I've been thinking about that, Mannah, since I read your question. I kind of wondered, did our ancestors have a need to have high self-esteem, to
Yeah.
feel good about themselves? And I began to grow skeptical, and I think it's somewhere in modernity. There came this need that we had to see ourselves as a self-contained package of perfection. Or if we didn't, somehow we weren't good enough for the world. And I think our ancestors didn't have that strong of a need for that illusory superiority or sense of self-worth, because their worth was in serving each other, doing for each other. The tribal nature of our ancestry suggests that your worth is always in doing, not in thinking about yourself.
So there's the focus on doing and the focus on the individual that has changed. Yeah.
I think so, that we spend a lot more time preparing people to become useful parts of the world. That's so much up to that point in time, you have to believe in yourself because you don't have a lot to prove your worth. Your worth is just in your education, your grades, some very, very, it's not a lot in what you do in the sense of for others, it's what you achieve for yourself. And I think our ancestors had to get on with the business of life, of serving each other very, very early on in life. And this need for prolonged education just wasn't there. It wasn't necessary for them to become useful parts of the tribe.
This is where we really agree, and where I can get really upset about the way the things are with the education system. Actually, my son just got the he's not I'm not sure about it because we have different school systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
But but from where he's at, he's got like the best grade 2 times now, and I just sent him a text saying, "That's really good, honey. Are you sure you didn't sell your soul to the school system?" And I didn't answer me back. And I was afterwards, congratulations, of course. But from my point of view, I don't care that he fulfills those standards because I think you can get
Yeah,
typical part of fulfilling those standards and not actually have learned anything. You can just like do what they want you to do. So
yeah. Yeah, if we tell our kids that that's just a part of you, and then to shift the dialogue towards, well, I love that you're working on this specific part of your talents. This is a part of your talents, not all. Now, if you pursue this, son or daughter, how are you going to use those talents? What are you thinking of how you're going to use those talents to make the world a better place? I would love to have conversations like that with kids to start getting them to think, do you see the talent you're working on now as a way in which you can become a contributing, useful part of the world? Because that's very critical to flourishing. And people don't realize that. They think they just need talents that make them important and powerful and make them a lot of money without seeing their worth and how they serve the world. And I think that's selling themselves short, I must say.
I'm gonna ask him that question. How is that gonna help you contribute? And I mean,
Yeah.
because right now the whole anything that's going on right now, everything that's going on for him as a 16 years old is just to how do I get into the next, right? Have to get this grade to
Mhm.
get into the next. So there's not that whole perspective. But what you
Yeah, they think very narrowly, don't they? Next steps, right? And by the way, if you do bring that up, Mannah, I'll stop here. But you, right, in the book, I talk about this. We when we talk about the sense of purpose, we put a lot of pressure on our young people as if we're telling them you have to have that purpose now. You don't. You just have to have a plan. I want you to be thinking about how your talents and your achievements align with a path towards which you will then be working in a way or a place or a job that will serve humanity in the way that you want to serve humanity. You don't have to be doing it right now. Don't, right? But I want you to be always thinking about that while you're making these important decisions in your life.
I like that, having that perspective in the back of your mind. Yeah. You
Yeah.
about how purpose is not only a luxury, it's not a luxury good. And I really want to talk to you about that, the whole impact of having a purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea that I have something important left to do. Now that can be anything and everything, but just unpack that. The sense that I still have some important work to do on this earth. Now, it's amazing to me that young people with ostensibly a full life ahead of them don't feel that. I can understand as people approach the end of life why that sense of purpose goes away. I wish it didn't. It doesn't have to. But as we approach the end of life, say ages 70 or older, a lot of people begin to start to believe they have nothing left of importance to do in this world. But that seems to be a critical sense about ourselves. A lot of people in my field, sociology and public health, talk about how the sense of control is so important to human beings. I think this sense of having something important left to do is just as important, if not more important, that the sense that we have some control over the world around us. I'm not saying it's not. It's just that we privilege this idea that humans have to have a sense of control in order to do well in life and live healthy lives. I get that. But what I think right up there is this sense of important work to do. It's not a luxury.
It's not just a luxury. Yeah. And you're calling it critical. I want to ask you why before I say anything.
Well, because I experienced it very, very personally, and I write about it in that chapter about how my sense of purpose was very, very tied up with the work I was doing. And suddenly, at the middle of my career, when I became a full professor, it my sense of purpose was all gearing up to writing a book on flourishing. And it just so happened, coincidences, right? Suddenly somebody was reviewing a chapter that somebody else who's a big name in positive psychology was writing a book on the very same topic. And they sent it to me out of a sense of compassion to say, I wanted you to know this is coming, this is happening. I want you to prepare yourself because I think you're going to feel betrayed. And I did when I read it. I thought, oh my God. But for me, Mannah, what suddenly happened was my purpose was destroyed. It went away. I lost it. Because that's the thing I talk about. You have to be very careful because where you place your purpose and how you think about it, it can become so strong and so narrowly focused that just because you have a purpose doesn't guarantee it's going to stay with you. And when I lost that, I write about it. I almost committed suicide.
It moved me a lot reading that.
That was very, 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 very close. I was that close. And if my wife had not come home early that night and said those 4 words, but I need you. Because when I lost my sense of purpose, I was like, oh, the world doesn't need me anymore. And I'm convinced when it comes to suicide and ending your life, the sense that you have nothing left to give and you're not needed here is one of the most dangerous set of thoughts to have as a human being, because when that happens to you, you don't have anything to live for.
Yeah, that is really my experience as well. It really is. And it moved me so much reading it because I'm like, you have so much to offer. Here you are, you've compiled this book and then you experience that, right? But it is, I can really relate to it. And listeners of this podcast will know that I've had suicidal ideation and a whole bit.
Yeah.
And I recently did a talk about that and then the antidote, and that for me that is purpose as well. It is, something that I am here, that I'm designed to do. It can just be really hard sometimes to believe it, right? If you don't have any evidence for it,
Yes.
you can do the spiraling down. But it is actually
Mhm.
to what you were calling the external path, right? Because you were saying someone else did it, so what? Like I'm not better? I mean, wasn't it related to the external
No,
path?
you're right. I think you're correct. You have to be careful that if your purpose is validated only in the sense that you produce something that has an impact that's grand or very large, you don't know your impact. And that's the point I make in the book. Start local, start small. I had to relearn that lesson because when I was young, I learned from my grandparents who had adopted me. That is the way to live because that's where you can have the greatest impact on a more frequent daily basis. Very close to home, very local, in your home, in your neighborhood, in your community. And I began to think a little too grand, like, this book was going to change the world around mental health and mental illness. And there's a lot of different layers of things going on here, but the most important was I I engaged in what cognitive behavioral therapists call a cognitive distortion. I had negative automatic thoughts that had been built into me because of my trauma. That when certain things happen like this, like that event with somebody else writing a book that I thought uh, didn't make mine necessary, I suddenly jumped right to a thought that was built into me because of my childhood trauma, which is, you're not wanted here. You're not needed here. Why are you here? Get out of here. I don't want you anywhere near me. And that's part of what traumatic experiences do to us. They build into us these risky negative thoughts that happen when negative experiences come along, and they make those negative experiences far more powerful than they need to be. So, yeah, that's why I had to stop, put away my work, and start working on me and the trauma, because no matter how hard I worked on my science and on my path to flourishing, and no matter how well things were going on my path, and even if I was flourishing, something that would trigger a negative, distorted thought that goes back to my early childhood trauma would derail me and take me off that path in a very dangerous way. And and that's the point of part of my story being woven into my book, is many of us have those. And they're not going to stay in your rear view mirror. They're going to be in your rear view mirror because they're always with you until you face them down.
I mean, that is really what to me brings the quality, the high quality of the book, is that you bring that personal touch to it. And so that we get to feel you and recognize ourselves in you. And also, I still have that, okay, could it really happen to Corey Keyes? I mean, that's, wow, someone like you, right? So that is even more important, that someone like you is open about it, right?
Yes, it's part of, I felt, yeah, I did not force that story into the book. It really was how my start in life was very much a blueprint for how I approached what I cared about in my career, my science, why I was driven to work on this body of work on discovering mental health and its absence, languishing, because it was a very personal journey. It was my way of feeling I had to discover what I needed to be better in this world. The only way I can describe it is the science I did was a very personal journey to provide myself and others with something that they would need that nobody else was providing them in therapeutic circles. They could treat my mental illness because they had no idea about what kept me in recovery, which was the stuff that goes into flourishing. They could treat my symptoms, but they never gave me a sense of purpose, belonging, contribution, personal growth, a sense of mastery, all the things that go into flourishing. I had to find that on my own. And that's the point of the book. We can do that together. That's how we create our mental health, by working together on these things.
Yeah, I feel there's so much to this, because one part is that we don't ourselves hold on to that negative train of thought of, I don't belong here now because, someone else wrote a similar book. That's one thing. And then there's also the way that society is put up to make us maybe feel that tremendous pressure.
Yeah.
Right? Did you not think about, I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert who spread this idea that everyone, can pick up on some idea out there for books or whatever, and then just few people go with it, but it's kind of in the sphere for a lot of people.
Yeah. I love that. I used that TED Talk of hers in my course on happiness when we were on the week of creativity. Because what wasn't it remarkable? She talked about how that she was never working to create a book that enormously successful. It just happened. She created something out of beauty because she was trying always just to be an artist, a writer. The book, Eat, Love, and Pray, was just a success that just happened out of her love for what she did. But then everyone started coming at her. The world started coming at her saying, well, now, how are you going to do something even better? And she almost fell for it because that's what destroys artists and writers. Well, now I got to do something better. And I'm like, then she starts talking about the ancient Greek notion of creativity as something that's not built, you're not born with it inside of you. All these impulses are floating around out there in the universe, and they come and strike us, and they come inhabit us, and you feel it. And then she talks about that poet running through the field, trying to get home to grasp, to get to a pencil so she has a moment where she could write down this beautiful thing where creativity suddenly came and visited her. I feel that myself. That happened when I was adopted. That burst of creativity was visited upon me out of love and safety. I experienced flourishing for the very first time, and I never let it go. I never forgot that.
How old were you?
So, I was 12 years old when they adopted me and my sister. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know fear. I knew love. I didn't know violence. I knew hugs. I wasn't in detention and getting bad grades. I was on the honor roll. I just needed to be transplanted. And then all of a sudden, I experienced something that I thought, oh my God. Oh, never forget that. You tasted something so beautiful. Now let's go out in the world. Now, I also experienced languishing at that time because of reasons I talk about in the book, but bringing up Elizabeth Gilbert just reminded me of the way I think of creativity too. There are moments in our lives where something comes from outside of us and a spark happens inside of us and you feel it. And the question is, do you answer it? Do you become the vehicle for that beautiful thing that the universe is bringing into the world? That's what we are. We're a conduit. The sparks are all over. They come and visit us. And if you listen to it, it's your job to go tell the story. Rejoice. Bring it into the world.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to really be on that, what you call the internal path of wanting to do good, so it's not blended with something else that can then, because then it does become fixated on the contribution rather than maybe the intention of it. Or
Yes, because the intention matters. That's the point of when I talk about that in the book, the paths. As you approach the 5 vitamins, always check your intention. Are you doing it to become a better person for other people? Or are you just doing it to get better at than other people at that vitamin? You can do both. Don't get me wrong. It's okay, but work a little more on the internal path, and you're going to find yourself becoming a better person. And it's very hard for other people to take that thing away from you. It's hard for other people to take your own character away from you. You can give it away. You could act in a way, but other people can't take your character, your integrity, your honesty, your courage away. Only you can give it away.
and so, what about you, Curry? How do you think about it now that there's another book? I don't know if it's still similar to this one, but what do you think about that whole experience? Oh, now someone did what I was gonna do, and what do you think?
Well, there's been a lot of people who have entered into this area of research, and they talk about flourishing. And the way scientists go about this today isn't the way I was trained, which is if you're going to introduce a concept into the world and you think you're doing something novel, you have to make the case for how your approach to flourishing is different or adds something than somebody else who was doing work in that area. That's not the way people do it today. And it almost comes across like they're trying to pretend like they're introducing the idea for the first time. And I don't understand that. That's not the way science works. We say that science is a cumulative process, which means it makes progress by building on what's come before, not destroying it or ignoring it or pretending it didn't exist. So the thing that pains me about this area right now is that people seem to think it's a hot area. And so they come into it. I've never heard of some of them, and they start writing about it like nobody has written about it before. And that I don't think is a healthy way to approach science. It's not a respectful way either.
Just to be clear, what area are you talking about?
Flourishing.
Flourishing area, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm all excited by the fact that the world is all interested in this stuff now. Great for you.
Yeah.
But the fact is, history, when it comes to science, can't be rewritten because there's a permanent record. So people will know who wrote the first articles and did most of the work for the first decade. You can't pretend. You can only do it for so long. So I don't see why you go about things that way, because it's just like if you make a claim on the internet about yourself, it better be accurate because everyone could go out there and check it right away. So if you make a claim that you're writing about flourishing as if you just thought about it, somebody can go on Google Scholar and go, well, oh my God, you're not the.
It's really credit where credit is due, like just recognizing.
Yeah, people have this sense that if they give credit for somebody who has written about this before them, somehow it's taking away from them. It's not. It just, if you have something to give, you make the point. If you don't, then all you have to do is pretend. That's the sad part of it. If you have nothing really uniquely different to add, then you have to pretend like you're the first. I just don't think that's a great way to live, because that's a very inauthentic approach to life.
It's so hinged upon that pressure that we find ourselves in, put on. It's like projected onto us, that pressure of you have to make it, and so it has to be unique, and so
I know. I just don't think people have spent a lot of time on the internal path, so that their sense of their conscience, their integrity isn't disturbed by the way they're acting. And I think that's a deficit in our world too. I worked very hard when I introduced the idea of flourishing to review everything that came before me. So far back that then I discovered way before the 12th century that languishing was the 8th deadly sin. I worked very hard to review everything that came before me.
That's a good scholarly discipline to do that.
Yeah, but it was amazing. When you look back, you find things way back in ancient history. That's what
I want to hear about that. I want to hear about that. It was the 8th deadly sin?
Yes, there used to be eight deadly sins. Now we talk about 7.
And
The
how?
eighth deadly sin was called acedia. Acedia. Now, you can go out and read about it. Some people claim that that these early Christians were writing about depression. I disagree vehemently. I don't think they were writing about sadness as the source of sinning. What they were writing about, and I describe it in my book, was a sense of emptiness, a feeling of numbness, a sort of sense that, well, what is this all for? I'm working hard. I'm trying to do right. And then when I rest, suddenly I don't feel good. I don't feel bad. I don't feel proud. I don't feel envious. I just feel nothing. And what's remarkable is the modern science shows that when people feel like they're languishing, that emptiness, they try to distract themselves and do things, sometimes undesirable things. Young teenagers, I write about in the past month, young teenagers that were languishing were much more likely to engage in non-suicidal, self-harming behaviors. Cutting,
Oh,
like cutting themselves, pinching themselves, pulling their hair. Why do they do that? Because they want to feel something rather than nothing. Feeling nothing is a very painful, haunting place to be. And people will seek distractions. They will take drugs, they will take alcohol, they will engage in unsavory sex, they will gamble, they will do anything and everything to distract their mind from this sense of emptiness.
mhm.
So I get it why it was considered a place of sin, because people will do even to this day anything that's readily available to make them feel something rather than nothing.
Mm. Yeah, it's an interesting because I usually think of numbing out because we don't want to feel, but you're actually saying it's because we don't feel, and of course, when we're numbed out, we can't feel the happy emotions either.
Yes, I think numbing out the way you're describing it, Mannah, is a way of turning off consciousness,
Yeah.
right? So when the ancient Christian monks would feel this, they described it as want of interest in life. They felt a want for it being interested in life. They felt no interest in life, in other words. They didn't feel disinterested in life. They just didn't have an interest in life. And so that feeling of emptiness and feeling nothing makes you want to seek a way of turning off your awareness of that emptiness. So we numb ourselves, not only to negative emotions and pain, but there is a pain that we feel when we're languishing as well. And people describe that. They say they feel like they're dying inside. That doesn't sound pleasant at all.
Maybe you have said this, Corey, but I just feel like asking you anyway. Why does it come about? I mean, I'm thinking about all the way back to the ancient Greeks. Why does it come about
Mhm.
not being interested in life?
I think we need to make a distinction of how languishing and this emptiness, this acedia, was at the beginning of your experience of it is a very normal response. And it's normal in the sense that it's a feeling, I believe, and I write about this, that comes to be, it happens to us when something that's very important to our well-being has been lost,
Yeah.
has gone missing. So people talk about despair when they're languishing. When you read about despair, it's not necessarily the presence of sadness. To despair is to feel something, a longing a negative sense of longing for something that you had that was really good for you that you no longer have. You've lost that. So this feeling comes when we've lost something that's really important to being fully human, like our sense of belonging, our sense that we're needed, our sense that we're loved, our sense that we're still growing, our sense that we're alive. When those things start to disappear,
Then we have this.
right, you start to feel empty. And I describe it as an alarm clock is going off. That's what languishing is in the early stage. It's a normal response. And it's an alarm clock that says, oh, wake up. You need to pay attention and go back and rediscover or restore something that you just let go of that's very important to your well-being.
Mm.
And here's the problem in modern life, and I think even in the ancient world, right? Every night we go to bed, we turn on our alarm clock in the modern world with the greatest attention of getting up when it goes off. What do many of us do? We hit the snooze button.
Yeah.
We get in trouble when languishing sets off the alarm. And what do? We say, I'm not going to pay attention to that right now. I got more important things to do. I got work. I got responsibilities. I don't have time to pay attention to the things that I talk about in the second half of the book. That's not important. I need to work. When you keep hitting the snooze button on your life, you will slide into a pathological form of languishing. And you will begin to feel like you're dying inside, like you're not growing. Your life doesn't have a sense of purpose. You're not contributing anything. Because when the wake-up call came and you started to lose those things, you didn't pay attention. You paid attention to things that society was saying, you need to do more of these things. Yeah, and I think that's what's going on in the world. And I think that's what was happening in the ancient world. The more you hit the snooze button on the things that were important to you, the worse you started to behave and do things that you didn't think was possible, that you didn't want. And you start to become a person that you never thought you would become.
Life becomes meaningless.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel you have a place in this world.
Yeah, I think I think too many of us, and I was guilty of that too. You kept hitting the snooze button. I'll get to that later when I have time. But it's the reason I talk about the book and call them vitamins is that if you don't take your vitamins for too long of a period, you will become fragile. You will become vulnerable. If you keep hitting the snooze button on those things that make your life meaningful, you will become a more pathological form of languishing. And I can't say it any stronger that we need to listen to that alarm call when it happens.
It's such a good image that you're giving me and the listeners, because images like that, they stay with you. They tend to stay with us. And I'll definitely think about that. And I also feel that it's an embodied experience, right? That we know, okay, probably then I didn't listen to that sound. And
Yes.
what does it take for me to be able to listen to that? For me right now, I'm definitely guilty of taking on too many activities. We also have a lot of going on in the collective astrology energy. So there's just a lot of things happening all at once. And then I would suppose anyway that it's more difficult to listen if you are constantly busy.
Yes. And the other way, if I could give your listeners another way of thinking about this, a lot of people, including myself, describe languishing as feeling a hunger.
Yeah.
A hunger for something more, something different. And I languish a lot at the end of the day, late afternoon, early evening. And when it happens, I feel a kind of hunger, like an emptiness in my belly area. It's not for food. It's because I didn't feed my soul. Throughout my day, I have an opportunity to feed myself the things I need and go out there and get it. I need to feel love every day. I need to feel like I belong every day. And I can't wait for the world. I'm not a little bird in a nest where my mommy and daddy are going to come bring the food to me. I have to go out there and get it. And when I don't do it, you know what? I feel hungry at the end of the day. And when you feel that pain, that emptiness, that's a hunger, you know you did not do for yourself what nobody else can do for you.
That is so good. That is so good. And it's really a way that I can go directly to the astrology, if you don't mind, because
Yes.
hunger is a Scorpio word. It's a Scorpio keyword. We have all these keywords when we are trying to learn an archetype. And then, of course, we have deeper layers than that. But that's one of the things that we connect to Scorpio, actually.
Oh, really?
Is it okay? I transition to that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I know we didn't talk too much about it last time, so I just have a few notes, and then I'm curious to hear what you have to say about it. But you do have a lot of Scorpio, and it's not just that you are a Scorpio on your sun sign. It's that you have a stellium in Scorpio, let's put it like that, and also your Pluto is in the 8th house. So there's several signatures, and it is really about. I mean, okay, I'm complicating it because you also have the South Node is in Aquarius, and that is being, for example, now we know that this is true for you, being brought up to take that social responsibility and to engage in social activities that is good for society, right? So but if we look at it as the past, then there's that tendency to detach, perhaps to not get abandoned and betrayed again. And I'm talking about a very recent past here. It could be in another life. But this chart, because it is so directed towards Scorpio, it really needs to understand feelings. And because Scorpio is the sign of regeneration, then there are many chances in this life and a lot of transformation. I mean, an innate sense that if you do not transform, if you do not do the changes, then you die. And part of that journey is to break taboos. Um, and and yeah, this is signature is it is a challenge to whatever identity structure. You were talking about character before. So whatever you identify with, this is a challenge because you constantly in this life you're going to go into a very conscious relationship with yourself. And so whatever we identify with, that is kind of that is not real. It's not the truest part of us, right? So in order for that to happen, what we can evolve in a way that we do experience some shocks and some emotional shocks to the system, and then we realize, okay, I was not that. What's more? And that's where the hunger comes in. Now you talk about hunger on a daily level, and I love that, but also in the bigger picture, there can be this hunger for that is at least that's not who I am anymore, right? I need to evolve, and I need to come to that truer place. Yeah, with myself.
Yeah. That's interesting because it's well, you've read the book and that's a bit of that's embodied in the entire story of this journey that I've been on. And the book represents uh, not the ending, but a part of that shows what's gone on a long part of the journey before it, and trying to regenerate, be reborn.
Yeah.
So, and to break, I always thought about this as the cycle of whatever caused the suffering and pain for my sister and I will be broken with me. If I have any power, I will live in a way that ends it, breaks it, sets it free, and no longer will be repeated. I don't know why, that sounds almost too grandiose, but I have to say, I was fiercely devoted to not letting it win.
Yeah.
I was like, and I wrote about that in the book. It was like throughout, it was with me throughout my life. Whenever somebody said something to me that would have sent me backwards, I said no to it. And I said, you are not going to win.
Yeah.
You will not destroy me. I was like, I don't know where that came from, Mannah. I do not know. It was there. And it has always been there. And I will bring that to my grave.
I love it. It's very fierce, and I don't think it's too grand at all. It's, another keyword for Scorpio is the intensity, that it is because it needs that intense power and focus to accomplish what you want. And that's up to you.
Mm.
Breaking vicious cycles is definitely a good cause for us.
Yeah.
And also talking about bringing it to the light, bringing taboos, collective taboos, societal
Yeah.
that we don't think about, and then you take it up into the light and see, look at it, and then there's a deconstruction that can take place when we look at it in the light. What was not so.
Yes. Yeah, I do not like things staying invisible that the world likes to conveniently keep invisible and say it's not important. I write about that. That I could tell right away. It was like, no, 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 no. This is not going to be invisible. Neither am I. And if I can do it, I want to shine light on others who came to believe the message that you should stay invisible. You should live like a ghost. No, no, we're not ghosts. We're here. And I don't like the word resilient, by the way, either. I just don't like that word. I don't think I'm a survivor or I'm resilient. It's far deeper than that.
What is it then?
I'm a soldier.
Yeah.
I and will ne I like, and I don't fight with the things that we think about other soldiers fight with. I don't need that. What we need is the courage to protect our souls. And
Yeah.
what I'm a soldier for is I'm a soul fighter.
Soul fighter. Yeah. Bringing us the soul vitamins.
Yeah, and I think everyone, when they feel fierce, what they're tapping into is their spirit and their soul. That will not be destroyed. You can't take that from me. That's the last thing I have.
Yes.
You can't have that.
Really. And what my teacher Maurice Fernandez always say about Scorpio is that in popular astrology, it often get confused with death, because there is that symbolism of getting having the rebirth, but actually Scorpio is not about death. It is about surviving. It is overcoming death. So that's pretty fierce as well. Overcoming death.
Well, I like, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the world misreads that. And I think if you were reading Jung, Carl Jung, you would read in this the same thing. It's not about death at all. It's about overcoming the death before we actually die. It's while I'm alive, I refuse for the world to suppress my soul and spirit so much that I feel dead while I'm alive. I refuse that. I will fight that to the end of the earth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
So it's about being alive in a world. That's interesting. What's the subtitle to my book? How to Feel Alive in a World That Will Wear us all down. It will, inevitably, but on the way there, I refuse to let it take that one thing from me, and I want you to refuse to let the world take your spirit, your soul, your well-being, your flourishing from
What
you.
wonderful contribution, and sharing that you're bringing that. I think it's something that we can all feel inside, and then when you say it, it's coming out, it's bursting up. What about the thing that I said about, I'm not sure if I said it clearly, but coming from maybe a tendency to detach and then need
Yeah.
to learn about emotions in order to go into that whole deep process of transformation. Do you recognize that?
Yes, and it's been complicated. As you might know, if when you have PTSD, the ability to go into our emotions has been so inhibited and so much more difficult because they're so powerful. And sometimes they feel like you've suddenly been thrown into a vortex in the ocean that you have no control over. And so in order to get to that point where you can detach and begin to understand and learn and overcome these emotions, you have to, you need help. You need earth angels, as I call them, my trauma therapists and others who have helped me be able to slow it down so I don't react. I can respond. People take that so for granted, the ability to simply choose how to respond in the middle of adversity. If you have PTSD and you've been triggered, that sense of emotion is so strong that sometimes you don't feel like you feel like a different person.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
So
so the journey has been complicated, but I'm now better at that. And
when did you get that diagnosis? Well,
oh, that was in shortly after my uh, um, the near suicide, where I had to take time away from work and go into intensive outpatient therapy. It never occurred to me that given all the experiences I had as a child, that would have been possible. It took some professional saying, "Well, wait a minute, Corey, look at your score on this diagnostic test of PTSD." I'm like, "Oh, I'm not crazy." Right? I mean, I thought I was crazy. I was like, something would come along and I was like, where did that come from? Why did I react that way? I felt such a powerful thing. I was not in control of it. Until I got that diagnosis, I did not have a sense that I had the, that gave me the possibility of working on it. And then I work and continue to work on it.
the lifelong one. Yeah, like we were talking
It's,
about, like this whole thing is continuous. Yeah.
oh, yeah, it gets better and easier, but never. The way I talk about it is until the diagnosis came along, the bruises were very visible. They were all over my body and my soul. And if you touched them, I was very, very reactive and it was very painful. Now you don't see them anymore. They're still there, but you have to press a lot harder for me to feel the pain. And I know you're already pressing on that, so I'm prepared to deal with what's being triggered. So the bruises are there, but they're not as visible anymore.
Another image, really, it is. Yeah, great image for anyone. But of course, it's more sensitive when you got something like PTSD.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. That it is for those of us with that.
Yeah, but everyone has, trigger points and woundings. Yeah.
Oh my God, yes, we do, and it does us all
Yeah, and
up.
it's what leading us into this journey of finding flourishing, finding ways, vitamins, right, to take to enliven us.
Yes, and it took a while for me to also start to say, I had to grow tired of letting it control me, right? It's like what alcoholics and addicts call, I had to hit a bottom where I was so exhausted, I was so tired of this having control over me that I decided, okay, that's not the way I live anyhow. So you're not going to control me. I've never been a person, even intellectually, I'm like a wild Mustang. You don't come and put a saddle on me. If you want to ride with me, you ride alongside. We'll run together. We'll run free. But as soon as you put that fucking saddle on me, I am going to fight. And I am going to kick. I'm going to scream. Because no. So even now that I'm healing, I know there's a spirit in me that you don't control me. You don't put saddles on me. You don't put reins on me. You come and say, I want to run with you. Let's run.
Like wild horses. I love it. I love it also from the astrology point of view. I really do, because yeah, where does that Scorpio energy come from? It comes from having already been abandoned, having already been let down, and saying, not anymore. And now I'm here to empower myself and empower other people, obviously.
Others, yes, we all, in our own way, want to be just like that wild Mustang. I was here to roam and run with my my tribe. Let's run together. We don't have to control each other. We'll serve each other by being true to ourselves. So
That's
anyway, yeah.
end this conversation, this part two of talking about your book, Languishing. Thank you so much for completing the book, even though there were many blocks on the road. And thank you so much for talking to us about it.
Well, I really enjoyed it, Mannah. You're doing good work, and I'm glad our path crossed.